Hi, Noam.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm here. Thank you very much for seeing us.
Hello.
This is Professor Akbar Ahmed,
Pleasure. Glad to see you.
and he was the former ambassador from Pakistan to Great Britain. He's currently chairman of the Islamic Studies Department, American University,
In
Washington.
In Washington.
And
Oh, I
also
see.
chairman of the Islamic Study Program at the U.S. Naval Academy.
Yeah, they just appointed a chair there. This is my wife, Zenat.
Hi.
So nice to meet you.
This is Frankie Martin and Haley Wolt.
Nice
These
to
are
meet
my
you, sir.
star students from the university and now working with me. And Craig, another star student of mine.
No
filming.
hands.
So, thank you so much for seeing us. I know how busy you are, and I'm grateful to my friend Barry Hoffman for setting this up. But it's important for us to talk to you, Professor Chomsky, because we are on a project. It's called Journey into America. I've taken a sabbatical, and I'm traveling with my group of young assistants who've already traveled with me to the Muslim world, as you'll see in this book, and I hope you'll have time to dip into it, considering the urgency of the world situation. We are looking at American identity, American notions of pluralism, civil rights, democracy, the core features of what America means or should mean to a lot of people, but looking at all these features through the lens of the Muslim community and the Muslim experience, and seeing whether they stand up or not, and seeing how then we can move things forward in a way where there'll be better understanding. So in this connection, Professor Chomsky, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions on record so that we can quote you in our book. The first question is American identity itself, what it means to be an American. How would you define American identity?
It's a very striking question, in fact, because this is, of course, a country of immigrants. And the immigrants were originally mostly English, but then German, Scotch-Irish, Swedes, Southeastern Europeans, Eastern Europeans like my parents. It is a melting pot. And the problem of creating an identity was a problem, a crucial issue from the very beginning of the settlement. And a lot of mythology was created, as is typical for nations. Nations are myths, so they have founding myths, identity myths, and so on. And if you look back at the original colonists, the ones who came here, let's say, to this area, they were religious fanatics who were waving the holy book, calling themselves the children of Israel, returning to the Holy Land, slaughtering the Amalekites, following the Lord's wishes, the Amalekites being the native population. And a lot of that extended. The others who poured in, many were similar, especially the Scotch-Irish. But they did develop a myth, it was an incredible myth in the 19th century, of Anglo-Saxon origins. We're the true Anglo-Saxons, no matter where we came from. Going back to before the Norman conquest, we're
Sorry, Professor Chomsky, are they here?
Oh.
Sorry, the rest of the team has to leave, so I'm very keen to just take some pictures. Can you just close the picture, the door? The rest of the team, Nathan, the chief of staff,
Hi.
and Maria.
Hi. Sorry, there's no chairs.
Can you just do a second, share the chairs?
And very strikingly, if you look over American history, each wave of immigrants at first was very harshly repressed. So in the Boston area where we are, there was big Irish immigration after the Irish famine and so on. But the Irish were barely a cut above blacks. I think the average lifespan for an Irish male in Boston in the late 19th century was about 14 years or something like that. There were signs, no dogs are Irish allowed, that kind of thing. Gradually over time they worked themselves into the political system, the social system, and became part of it. The Jewish immigration was pretty similar, Jews, my father worked in a sweatshop, Jews were the criminals, Murder Incorporated was run by Jews, finally they kind of worked themselves. They became school teachers and they worked themselves in bureaucracy, became the most privileged minority in the country. And it's happened with wave after wave of immigrants. A lot of the race problem in the United States actually is an immigration problem, in a sense. In the 1920s and the 1930s, there was mechanization of agriculture in the South, which drove out the black population who were living under virtual slavery conditions. I mean, technically slavery was over, but conditions weren't very different. They had to go north. Well, during the Second World War, it wasn't a problem. The Second World War was a major shot in the arm for the U.S. economy. In fact, it created the United States as the dominant world system. So there were plenty of jobs in manufacturing and so on. After the war, the economy began to shift slowly away from large-scale manufacturing towards more of a high-tech industry, services, later information technology, and so on. And they can't be absorbed. Earlier waves of immigration were absorbed into a growing manufacturing or economy, but that wasn't possible any longer with the black internal immigration. And that's, so what you see is a sharp rise in imprisonment. From 1980 to the present, incarceration has just shot out of any relationship to other countries or any relationship to crime. There's no relationship to crime. It's partly a reflection of the fact that the normal mode of absorption of immigrants into the society has been blocked. The hysteria today about illegal immigration is just a replica of what's been going on through American history. And at one point it was what they called Huns, people from Eastern Europe. It was Irish, it was Jews, it was who were regarded as degenerates, Italians, WAPs and so on. And it goes right to the present, Chinese. Another element that runs through the creation of American identity in this complex system is fear. It's a very frightened country, unusually so by international standards, which is kind of ironic because they have a level of security that nobody's ever dreamed of in world history. But from the very beginning, there's a strong element of fear. You find it it's been studied, you find it in popular literature, the kind of literature for the masses. Now it would be television or movies or something, but for a long time it was magazines or novels. There's the theme that runs through them from the 18th century. The theme is we're about to be destroyed by a horrifying enemy, and at the last minute, a super weapon is discovered, or a great hero arises, and Rambo or something, and somehow saves us, the Terminator, or high school boys hiding in the mountains, defending us from the Russians. This goes right back to the 18th century. A secondary theme underlying it is that the great enemy that's about to destroy us is somebody we're crushing. So in the early years, the great enemy was the Indians, the native population. We're exterminating them, but they're about to exterminate us. Then it was the blacks, the black slaves. There's going to be a slave uprising. All they want to do is rape white women and so on and so forth. We've got to do something about them. They go on, later in the century, it was the Chinese. You think they're coming in here to start laundries, but in fact they're planning to take over the country and destroy us. And even progressive writers like Jack London were writing novels about how we have to kill everyone in China with bacteriological warfare to stop this nefarious plot before it goes too far. Then comes Hispanics, and now it's Muslims. But the theme runs right through, and very typically, it's some group that we're crushing, which is about to destroy us. And the paranoia is very real. You see it with populist leaders. Like take somebody like Lyndon Johnson, who was, whatever you think of him, kind of a man of the people, was close to the public mood. In the Vietnam War, he made some very interesting speeches to American soldiers. He said, look, he said, we're fighting for our lives. His quote, he said, there are 150 million of us and 3 billion of them, the rest of the world. And if might makes right, they'll sweep over us and take it all that we have. So therefore we have to stop them in Vietnam. Ronald Reagan, who was an unbelievable cowardly thug, in 1985 he strapped on his cowboy boots and declared a national emergency because the security of the United States was threatened by Nicaragua. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. He said the Nicaraguan army is 2 days from Texas. We got to do something. We're practically about to be destroyed. We have to invade Grenada, which the nutmeg capital of the world, because maybe they'll put up an air base, which maybe the Russians will use to bomb us. Now we have to have a missile defense system in Poland, because who knows, maybe Iran will send missiles, which they don't have, nuclear weapons, which they don't have, because all they want to do is destroy us. This theme is just consistent, and it's part of creating an identity, which is in part an effort to create a nation out of nothing, like most nations, and secondly to weld it together as a world-conquering system on the basis of fear.
So would you say that out of all these different competing identities, it's the primeval, the fundamental Anglo-Saxon one which dominates and then informs the others?
Total myth. The Anglo-Saxon, you should really, there's interesting work on it. The Anglo-Saxon identity was really believed, and it's pure myth. Actually, most nations are myths. Sometimes, take say Israel. If you actually pay any attention to origins, the descendants of the original Jews are the Palestinians. Peasants stay on the land. One wave of conqueror comes in, another wave comes in, the peasants stay there. The people who are coming in, calling themselves Jews, are probably Berbers or Khazars from the Caucasus or something like that. Actually, there's an interesting book that just came out by an Israeli historian. It's sort of known, but he goes through it in detail. It's actually a bestseller in Israel. But yes, it's a mythical system. But that's what nations are. They're mythical communities based on invented histories, founders who didn't exist, goals that don't exist, and that somehow bind people together. What makes Pakistan a nation?
Yeah. But Professor Chomsky, on this journey we're interviewing a lot of people, and we meet many mainstream Americans, especially white Christian Americans. And when we ask them what American identity means, and this is an anthropological study, they would define it simply to say it means freedoms, it means liberty, it means, all the mythological features of what American...
That's what you're taught in 8th grade civics class. And you're supposed to repeat that. If you were in the Soviet Union, in the days when it existed, you would, if you asked what Russian identity is, it's, workers rule the world, democracy, justice for everyone. Yeah, you have things hammered into your head, and you repeat them, but nobody believes them. So, in fact, these same people, when they're asked, who do you think runs the country? 80% of them say the country is run by a few big interests looking out for themselves with no concern for the public. They have utter contempt for institutions. Everyone knows that George Bush's popularity is low. Congress's popularity is even lower. And if you run through other institutions, they're all hated and feared because they're just those big guys looking out for themselves. If you want to get a good sense of this part of America, what I'd advise is listen to talk radio. Listen to Rush Limbaugh. He's very cynical, but he's an example of something that the world really ought to be frightened of. If we've been lucky, and the world has been lucky, that no charismatic leader has ever arisen in the United States. Joe McCarthy was too much of a thug.